welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a very unique Gen Z-led protest that is ongoing in South Asia. The most recent one, of course, is from Nepal. But the protest has not been limited to Nepal. It started largely with Sri Lanka, followed by Bangladesh, then in Nepal and in Indonesia as well. So apart from South Asia, Southeast Asia is also suffering this problem of Gen Z-led protest. In today's video, we will be delving into the details of reasons for these popular protests that is ongoing in South Asia and Southeast Asia. But apart from this, we will also be looking into or very carefully studying about the commonalities and the differences that is related to these Gen Z protests of South Asia and Southeast Asia. To begin with, Nepal protest, which was a 3-day led protest. The first day's protest was largely peaceful. But because police retaliations or the government's retaliations to such kind of protest has been very harsh. So the second day the protesters turned out to be very violent. Now the primary question is, what led to these protests? Especially in Nepal. Let's talk about Nepal first. In Nepal, the protest was largely against the Nepo kids. So who are these Nepo kids? Nepo kids are the children of former prime ministers who are leading a lavish life in European nations or very high income nations. For example, one of the posters, one of the images that was being circulated in social media by some of the top leaders, protesting leaders in Nepal, was that of a former prime minister's son who was riding a Ferrari in France. So such kind of lavish life was being led by children of the former prime minister, and it of course compromises the large scale the dreams of the large scale unemployed or underemployed or workers who are working in informal sector in Nepal. As a consequence to this, government banned the social media accounts. Government banned social media itself. For example, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, or even WhatsApp was banned. Now, Nepal is one such country whose approximately 8% population lives outside Nepal and is responsible for bringing in remittances to Nepal. So once such kind of communication or social media is banned, such as even WhatsApp gets banned, obviously there was expected huge round of protest in Nepal. As we discussed, the first day of protest was still peaceful. If the government would not have retaliated in such a harsh form, the second day might not have turned so violent and we might have a different situation in Nepal today. Now, talking about the next country in the South Asian peninsula, in the South Asian region, that was Bangladesh. Bangladesh let's call this as the last nail on the coffin, although there were continuous protests against the Digital Services Act, which was trying to carry out curbed communication or at least trying to carry out monitoring of communication amongst the common masses. So Digital Services Act was one of the objectionable bills that were passed in Bangladesh's parliament. But apart from this, Sheikh Hasina government herself was facing criticism for running an authoritarian government. But the last nail on the coffin was the reservation bill which was introduced by the Sheikh Hasina government in the parliament of Bangladesh, which was to give reservation to the children of former freedom fighters by 1/3. That means these children, who were largely the supporters of Awami League, that is Sheikh Hasina's government, would obviously stand in support of this bill and she would be able to secure some amount of vote for her own political party. This reservation bill turned out to be the last nail on coffin, after which the protesters came on streets. The next country in our discussion is Sri Lanka, that the protesters protested in 2022. Sri Lanka faced this kind of protest largely because of the economic crisis, because of country facing very high inflation. There were long queues for accessing basic government services with respect to hospital, with respect to education. 12-hour power blackout. They were not able to get simple access to basic breads. And that led to such a huge round of protest in Sri Lanka. Last but not the least, of course, we have Indonesia, which is extending beyond South Asia, but extending within Southeast Asia itself. Indonesia is also encountering public protest, and the reason is largely that the government has introduced, the Parliament of Indonesia has introduced a housing allowances for the MPs of Indonesia. That is, the members of Parliament of Indonesia will now be given a housing allowance. This allowance is equivalent to 10 times the minimum wage of Jakarta. So that has led to public wide outrage against the government. Talking about the commonalities with respect to Sri Lanka, with respect to Bangladesh, Nepal and even Indonesia, we will be delving into the commonalities, but let's first look into the differences. If we look into the differences of these countries who are right now under showing aggressive resentment against the government, against the democratically elected government. So if we look into these countries such as Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Nepal or even Indonesia, they have had specific histories. They have had unfolding of some of the events which were specific to these countries. Of course, they have shown different levels of constitutional maturity. Constitutional democracy has been running into these countries for a different time period. So that of course would create some kind of differences in the politicians, amongst the political maturity. The constitutional democracy would show some certain kind of differences. As we discussed, that these three, four countries also have had such kind of historical events in past decade, that these events are very, very unique to these countries. But there are certain common threads that runs into these rages, and that brings us to the commonalities. Looking into the commonalities, these countries are some of the most populated regions of the world, be it Bangladesh or Nepal or Sri Lanka or even Indonesia. These are some of the most populated regions of South Asia. Secondly, these countries are also those countries who are encountering slow and inequitable development. They are encountering that there is growth. The growth is very, very low post-COVID, and that is common to all the countries. But what is so unique to these countries, that they are encountering inequitable development. Thirdly, the average age, that is why we are calling this as the Gen Z protest, be it with respect to Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Nepal or Indonesia. We are calling them as Gen Z protest because the average age is itself less than 30 years. With respect to Indonesia, it is 30, but with respect to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Nepal, it is less than 28 also. Another commonality between these countries is the per capita GDP. Per capita GDP of these countries is less than the global average. That gives them that reason for resentment against the government. Additionally, the literacy rate of these countries are more than 70%. So this is the educated, unemployed or underemployed youth who is protesting against the political establishments, where these political establishments have not been able to ensure employment or ensure grievance redressal to whatever has been the grievances of these section of society. Additionally, the kind of protest or the kind of uprising that these countries are witnessing does not have a face. At least at the time of the protest, there was no political face which was leading these protests. So there is a sudden uprising of an unexpected scale that is leading to toppling of the government. Plus, they are all exhibiting some deep-seated disillusionment towards the government, towards the country's political leadership, and that is one that is very, very common to these Gen Z-led protests in South Asia as well as Southeast Asia. Now, there are lessons to be learned from these protests. Point number one, which we have also reiterated during Bangladesh protest, that the youth and the students' protest should never be taken casually. India itself has witnessed JP movement and previous such kind of student-led protest, which has led to toppling of the government. So these countries should have also not taken such kind of student-led protest or Gen Z-led protest very casually. Additionally, if there is some kind of political disillusionment which is growing amongst the masses, such kind of grievances must be catered to at the earliest. We need to prioritize, all the countries across South Asia and Southeast Asia must need to prioritize the grievance redressal, especially amongst the youth. So with these lessons in mind, we conclude our discussion for today. If you have any doubt, please do let us know in the comment section below. Thank you so much and all the very best.